Não estou a ouvir nada. Então, som, 1, 2, está? Estou. Oh, tá. Obrigada. Como é que se chama? Desculpa, Paulo. Som. Muito bom dia. Sejam bem-vindos ao Palácio Valenças e à Vila de Sintra, que acolhe a sessão pública de apresentação do relatório da OCDE, a Organização para a Cooperação e Desenvolvimento Económico, documento que examina e avalia as políticas de ambiente em Portugal e o progresso do país ao longo da última década em matéria de ambiente. A abrir a sessão, vai usar a palavra
the Mayor of Sintra, Mr. Basilio Horta, will take the floor. Good morning, everyone. Dear Minister, Secretaries of State, General Director for OECD, guests, before anything else, I would like to tell you that it is an honor to welcome here OECD at such an important moment, the presentation of the Portuguese review on environmental performance. It is a pleasure and to welcome you in Sintra, which landscape is World Heritage. This report of environmental performance, it's a very interesting document. It is a document that deeply analyzes the progress that Portugal has made regarding carbon neutrality, also relating to the sustainable development goals, what we have been doing, and provides an analysis for the use of EU next generation funds. It is a very complete report that is worthwhile to read and follow up, as normally OECD reports. I've been the ambassador of Portugal to OECD for 4 years, and therefore I know very well the reports and the importance they have, not only to Portugal, but the key influence that these reports have in international consensus. Therefore, it is very important to have this report and evaluation. Regarding Sintra, we have and we are living such a moment that there is a disturbing moment. So in the cities, most population live, and cities are responsible for 75% of carbon emissions. So in the cities, there is a concern, a large concern, regarding environmental policies and sustainable development. Sintra has not been an exception. We have been concerning with environmental matters internally and externally. Internally, we have invested deeply in urban parks regarding green tracks, cycling tracks, using the structural funds, environmental matters. Sintra has received more than 30 million for environmental projects, and PRR or RRP, we have 46 million already given, which is also a considerable amount. So we have been investing a lot, both in the area to preserve heritage and to increase the quality of life, quality of water, sewage processing or treatment. We have a serious concern in this domain, and also internationally. We are the members of the Covenant of Mayors. We had a commitment in 2020 to reduce carbon emissions in 20%. We arrived at 28%. We have a commitment for 2030 of 45–50%. We are committed with that as well. We are part of the carbon disclosure as well. And this really, we had very positive results. We signed Green City and the Treaty of Paris. Here, when we signed the Treaty of Paris, we joined the initiative Racing to Run. We are very well classified, together with more than 65 municipalities or city councils. 1,000 cities, 600 companies. So we are really committed with this fight. And very recently, as the minister knows very well, because he gave us his support, being very attentive to these matters, we created the protected maritime area. We did an agreement in 2021 for Blue Ocean, and Mafra and Cascais joined as well. And the government was very attentive and today is supporting this major initiative, which for us has a significant meaning. We also have an agreement with the Catholic University. We are monitoring 17 OECD Sustainable Development Goals in environmental matters and heritage preservation. Our urban master plan, which has been considered very restrictive, in our opinion, it was not restrictive. There was really a need to do what we had to do in territory management. So there was a need to make some corrections. So it is an urban master plan that preserves the heritage, that takes already into account the environmental priorities that Sintra has as a territory. We are the second municipality more populated in the country. We have more than 400,000 people and a big area. The mix between territory and population, we are a municipality very unique because, for instance, Lisbon has 100,000 people more, but has much smaller territory. This dimension and this diversity in Sintra, it's a very big diversity. On the one hand, it's something rich, but requires a sophisticated management. The north of the municipality, for instance, is rural, has a language, which is the stone, the Pedro Pinheiro region, then an historic center, very strong, very valuable, and then a region with 75 square kilometers with more than 300,000 people live. So it is really difficult to manage. As far as environment is concerned, we have to deal with everything. All the municipality services, and just to give you an idea, approximately 95% or even more of the Sintra territory has basic treatment or sewage treatment. Today, water loss are 17%. The effort that we have been doing in the quality of water and preservation of water are an unreplaceable heritage. Dear Minister, dear Secretary of State, dear General Director, this is what I had to tell you. Now a brief greeting to Madam.
Well, very warm welcome to Sintra, to our city, which is a very nice city, which is World Heritage City, and so we are very happy to receive, very honored to receive you here. And I remember the time I have passed in Paris in OECD, these almost 4 years, these beautiful years of my life, of my professional life, and I have very good friends there. I see one of that work with me almost 4 years in our embassy there. Pour vous, Madame, Monsieur et Madame, c'était un plaisir de vous trouver ici à Sintra. Je suis très heureux de vous voir chez nous et je vous souhaite une très agréable et très productive, historiquement productive, c'est-à-dire ici à Sintra. Merci à tous. Thank you very much. Have a nice day and a very good work. Thank you so much.
Para a apresentação da avaliação do desempenho ambiental de Portugal e das conclusões e recomendações que constam do documento que hoje se divulga e torna público, vai usar da palavra a diretora do Departamento de Ambiente da OCDE, Jo Tyndall.
Now I do. Minister Cordero and Mayor Horta, ladies and gentlemen, Mayor Horta, thank you so much for your introductory words. It's impressive to hear the emphasis being placed on environmental considerations here in the city of Sintra. For me, it's a particular pleasure to be here for my first ever visit to Portugal. What a wonderful place to come, and it's great to know that this is sort of coming full circle given the time that you have spent as Portugal's ambassador to the OECD in Paris. So it's a delight to be here today to launch the 4th OECD Environmental Performance Review of Portugal. Now, I think I've got, it's loaded. I probably need an I've gone too far. So, just by way of introduction, the environmental performance reviews the OECD conducts provide an evidence-based assessment of countries' progress towards their environmental objectives. We cover OECD members and selected non-member countries. And the reviews promote peer learning. They document good practices and provide recommendations to help countries progress towards their goals. This is the 4th Environmental Performance Review of Portugal. Prior to this one, there were reviews in 2011, 2001, and going right back, 1993. For this review, in addition to the core chapter on sustainable development, there's a special chapter on carbon neutrality. Costa Rica and Luxembourg, the examining countries, brought their experience and made valuable contributions to this focus chapter. I really want to thank very, very deeply you and colleagues from the government for the very excellent support and cooperation you've provided throughout this process. The review also benefited from inputs by environmental NGOs, academics, business representatives, and local authorities. Minister Cordero was with us in Paris in December when OECD member countries discussed the report and approved its assessment and recommendations on the 6th of December last year. So now it is my pleasure to present some key findings from this review, if I can get the technology to work. Yes. So Portugal's economy grew steadily between 2013 and 2019. You'll all be aware that it was strongly hit by COVID-19, but has been recovering fast from the pandemic since mid-2021. Russia's war against Ukraine is driving up energy and food prices, and that's reduced Portugal's economic growth prospects for 2023 and 2024, despite the fact that there's pretty low reliance here on imports from either Russia or Ukraine. Over the period 2013 to 2019, Portugal managed to decouple energy consumption and major air pollutant emissions from economic growth. So that's a really good development. At the same time, though, material consumption, municipal waste generation, and freshwater abstractions have grown at either the same rate or even faster than GDP. Portugal has made progress towards Sustainable Development Goal, or SDG, SDG 7, which is about increasing access to clean energy. Over the past decade, the energy mix has shifted from oil and coal to natural gas and renewables. Fossil fuels do continue to account for the bulk of energy supply, but the share of renewable sources in both supply and electricity generation is higher than in most European countries. And we want to make a particular point of congratulating Portugal on its exit from coal in 2021, which was 2 years ahead of schedule. It was a really good outcome. Portugal can be commended for its climate action. The EPR shows it played a leading role in the approval of the European climate law in June 2021 during its presidency of the Council of the European Union. It has also adopted the Portuguese framework climate law, and the report highlights the many promising provisions of this law designed to improve policy governance, and it includes things like 5-year climate budgets, setting sectoral mitigation plans, municipal climate action plans, having an annual progress report to Parliament, and establishing an independent council for climate action. So the report encourages Portugal to implement these aspects of the law quickly. The country met its 2020 targets for climate, greenhouse gas emissions, excluding land use change and forestry. The emissions decreased by 1/3 between 2005 and 2020, and that's really impressive. However, projections indicate that to meet the climate law requirements, which are to reduce emissions by at least 55% from 2005 levels by 2030, and by 90% by 2050, additional policies are going to be needed. So far, emission abatement has been concentrated on energy production. So when revising the National Energy and Climate Plan, we recommend Portugal should clarify the measures envisaged to achieve its goal, quantify their mitigation impact, and specify how they'll be financed. So it's a question of how you translate that wonderful ambition into meaningful, achievable action. It's going to be essential to tap the decarbonisation potential of all sectors to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. And this involves accelerating the development of renewable energy, I can't read my word there, building renovation, and focusing on building renovation and low carbon vehicles, reducing car use and tackling the growing emissions from agriculture. It'll mean sending consistent carbon price signals across sectors and fuels, and prioritising targeted income support rather than energy price control in order to deal with energy poverty. Portugal has stepped up its effort to adapt to climate change, and I think in the introductory comments from the Mayor, we understand how important this is. It's adopted a national adaptation strategy in 2015 and an action program in 2019. Public information on climate change risks has improved considerably, and adaptation is increasingly integrated into sectoral strategies. Now, we know the country faces multiple threats related to climate change, and those include coastal erosion, heavy precipitation events, and extreme heat days. Portuguese people are more exposed to long periods of hot days than other European countries, and the definition for a long period is periods of more than 2 weeks. So that's becoming a significant concern. Drought is structural, and as a result, it undermines agricultural yields and hydropower production. And we also know Portugal is regularly affected by wildfires, with 78% of its forest areas exposed to fire danger. The EPR praises Portugal for improving wildfire risk prevention, but at the same time, it highlights the challenge of improving forest land management practices in abandoned rural areas where land ownership is private and fragmented. So the recommendation here is for Portugal to complete the rural land cadastre and extend payments for ecosystem services to reduce the risks of forest fires. Just turning to air pollution. Portugal achieved its 2020 targets set by the EU directive on the reduction of national emissions of certain atmospheric pollutants. It missed the target for ammonia, or NH3, whose emissions have grown, and this is consistent with an increase in poultry numbers. People are less exposed to air pollution in Portugal than in other OECD countries. Good. However, pollution remains a concern with regard to concentrations of nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter in urban areas, and in rural areas, exposure to tropospheric ozone. Fuel and vehicle taxation have contributed to the increase in diesel vehicles and the ageing of the fleet, and that's had adverse effects on air pollution. In 2020, almost 60% of passenger cars were diesel-powered, and that's one of the highest shares in the European Union. Lisbon has introduced a low-emission zone, banning the most polluting vehicles from the city centre. Now, there have been some improvements as a result, but it has not significantly reduced concentrations of nitrogen oxides and fine particulates. So the EPR recommends that Portugal should gradually close the tax gap between diesel and petrol and remove the preferential circulation tax treatment for older vehicles in order to rejuvenate the fleet and nudge consumers towards cleaner vehicles. It also recommends ensuring the effective enforcement of low emissions zones. Another area we looked at was the circular economy, where Portugal is lagging behind. Since 2013, domestic material consumption has varied, and that's been very much in line with changes in GDP. Municipal waste generation has grown at a faster rate than the economy. In 2020, Portugal was among the OECD countries with the highest landfill rates, and unfortunately the country has missed most of its 2020 waste targets. Financing the sector relies on recovering the costs of waste management services. In 2020, 3/4 of municipalities did not fully recover the costs of waste service provision through tariffs charged to consumers. And waste charges are included within the water bill and usually linked to water consumption. So for that reason, the EPR recommends that passing on municipal waste management costs to households needs to be accelerated, and we recommend doing this through dedicated, identifiable charges that are decoupled from the water bill. And this should be part of wider awareness-raising campaigns to move up the waste hierarchy and to develop separate collection of waste. So turning to biodiversity, over the past decade, the status of habitats and species has deteriorated. Agriculture, infrastructure development, invasive species, erosion, climate change, and fires are exerting major pressures here on biodiversity. Portugal did meet the 2020 Aichi target of protecting land area. It achieved 25% protection against the target of 17%, so that was really good. But it slightly missed the target of protecting coastal and marine areas. It achieved 8.9% as opposed to the 10% target that had been set. Management plans have been developed for only a few sites of community importance in the Natura 2000 network. Portugal allocated about €3 billion to farmers for adopting environment-friendly land management practices under the Rural Development Programme, which was for the period 2014 to 2022. But the EPR couldn't assess the impact of the agri-environmental measures on biodiversity due to the lack of appropriate indicators. In addition, Portugal supports water-intensive crops in water-stressed areas, as well as livestock-intensive farming through coupled support and market measures under the Common Agricultural Policy. So here, the EPR recommends that Portugal should further mainstream environmental objectives in the new Common Agricultural Policy, and to divert public support from emission and resource-intensive activities in the agriculture sector. Portugal has improved wastewater treatment, but challenges remain in using water efficiently and achieving good status of water bodies. In 2021, less than half of surface water bodies and less than 2/3 of groundwater bodies achieved good global status. The most significant pressures on these bodies are diffuse agricultural sources. Agricultural abstractions, the main source of freshwater abstractions, have increased by about 25% since the mid-2010s, particularly in water-stressed southern regions. Our water charges could better reflect environmental and resource costs. Although they vary with water scarcity, rates are reduced for irrigation. The ease of licensing new water abstractions in water-stressed areas, the limited capacity to monitor and fine illegal abstractions, and low water abstraction charges for non-potable uses mean that water reuse rates are very low. They're only about 1%. The EPR therefore recommends that Portugal should raise water abstraction charges for agriculture. It should strengthen the capacity to monitor abstractions and enforce water licensing regulations and limit new abstraction permits in over-allocated basins. At around 2% of GDP, total public green investment was amongst the lowest in the OECD in 2019 and 2020. The cohesion policy is the main source of financing, accounting for nearly 60% of Portugal's public investment over 2014 to 2020. With next generation EU funds, Portugal needs to manage significantly higher amounts in the period from 2021 to 2027. So this is a real opportunity to address environmental issues but of course also a challenge in terms of implementing programs. Over the period 2014 to 2020, Portugal had a high absorption rate of structural funds allocated to environmental protection and resource efficiency, to climate change adaptation and to risk prevention. However, projects on improving energy efficiency and developing clean urban transport infrastructure and railways have been delayed, partly due to their complexity. Portugal's Recovery and Resilience Plan is to be supported by grants and loans representing about 8% of 2020 GDP. Portugal devoted 38% of its Recovery and Resilience Plan budget to the climate objectives. The RRP rightly focuses on improving energy efficiency and promoting sustainable mobility. It also includes investments to decarbonise industrial processes and boost the production and use of hydrogen, prevent and fight rural fires, and improve water use efficiency. However, concerns have been raised about investment in road network extension, committing to new dams in water-scarce areas, and about the limited support for biodiversity. Now, I have to tell you, that's something we're hearing more and more frequently in the OECD context, that climate change issues and biodiversity issues, along with other environmental concerns, have to be looked at together. So the EPR recommends that Portugal should carry on efforts to ensure the transparent and effective implementation of programs financed with EU funds, prioritising projects with the highest social return, and that it should carefully assess the environmental impacts of RRP investments. In 2014, Portugal introduced a green tax reform, including a carbon tax in sectors outside the EU emissions trading system. It also increased the CO2 component of the vehicle registration tax. It revised the taxation of water and waste management, granted property tax breaks for forest management, and introduced a tax on lightweight plastic bags. This is all good stuff. Revenue from environmentally related taxes rose from 2.3% of GDP in 2014 to 2.5% of GDP in 2019. So it's now above the OECD Europe average of 2.3%. The increase in consumption and tax rates on diesel explains this increase, but the effect was abated when the COVID-19 crisis reduced the purchase and use of cars. The tax on single-use lightweight plastic bags has significantly reduced their use. However, green taxes have not provided consistent incentives to curb energy and water use, nor to divert waste from landfills. The Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Environment and Climate Action are evaluating the impact of the green tax reform. So the EPR encourages Portugal to complete this evaluation and to apply the polluter pays principle more consistently. Many preferential tax treatment blur the price signals, and this is the case with some other OECD countries. Portugal also supports fossil fuel consumption through tax expenditure, with oil and gas attracting the bulk of government support. The largest amounts include reduced tax rates for diesel fuel, particularly used by agricultural machinery, and since 2017, a partial refund of diesel taxes to freight companies, tax exemptions on energy products used for electricity production, and on cogeneration or by industrial installations under the ETS, as well as exemptions via an energy efficiency agreement. So overall, this tax relief represented 0.3% of GDP in 2020 and 2021. Since 2014, revenue foregone from tax relief measures has increased, with rising consumption and taxes on diesel and natural gas. In 2018, Portugal started to phase out some exemptions, which really helped the exit from coal. However, in response to rising prices, Portugal has introduced new measures supporting fossil fuel consumption, and we know it's not alone in this. The 2021 climate law provides for the phase-out of fossil fuel subsidies by 2030. Portugal is setting up a unit to regularly monitor and assess tax benefits and to streamline the tax system. So the EPR recommends, as part of the inventory of tax benefits, to identify potentially environmentally damaging support measures and phase out those that cannot be justified on economic, environmental, or social grounds. So, thank you for your attention. In conclusion, the EPR comes forward with 26 recommendations, and the aim of these EPR reports is to really help countries, in this case obviously Portugal, to further progress towards its goals of carbon neutrality and sustainable development. So we hope it is received in the constructive way it has been developed and agreed. Thank you very much for your attention.
Lembramos.
Remember that there are interpreting equipment in the room. If you need them, please ask them to the protocol team. Next, and for a general appraiser on the relevance of the contributions that periodic assessments carried out by OECD bring to the country's policies, the Minister for the Environment and Climate Action, Mr. Duarte Cordeiro, will take the floor. Good morning. I would like to start by greeting the Mayor of Sintra, the Director of the Environment Department of OECD, and also the whole team of the OECD team who worked in the preparation of this report. Also, I would like to greet the Mayor of Lolé, who is here with us. I would like to also greet the Secretary of State and the whole team and directors from the Ministry of the Environment who took part in this report, all the entities attending here the event. I apologize for not referring everyone. Thank you for the collaboration. The Finance Ministry is also here. We had the opportunity to be together in Paris in the discussion of the report and in here in the final presentation, and also to greet the councillors, authorities, and finally to thank our guests who are going to take part in a moment that we will be holding. The President of the Felipe Duarte Santos, Professor of the Faculty of Law in Coimbra, Alexandre Aragão, and once again, the OECD team. I start by thanking the Mayor of Sintra for hosting this event, and also to congratulate for the work you have been doing in the environment and sustainability here in this municipality. Sintra is the second municipality of our country. It is a very beautiful land. We have been doing such an incredible work in the environment. And also to say that the Mayor is very sensitive to this subject and all the subjects related to the OECD, having been ambassador of OECD to the OECD from 2002 to 2005. And to say that Sintra, in addition to being a good reference, Lole is also very important because this municipality is underlined in the OECD report. We are here to present and to know the recommendations that arise from this report on environmental policies for Portugal. And also, I would like to tell you and thank the team of the OECD team, Mrs. Jo Tyndall, Mr. Ziegel, Ellen Blank, who supported us in this report. To also thank two other members of the team, Mr. Barbanter and the respective governments from Luxembourg and Costa Rica. These reports is an opportunity and an added value to the OECD countries because it is an evaluation made by its peers, allowing for an extensive multidisciplinary evaluation that make recommendations on what we should do in the future, taking into account the evolution of the last years. Portugal has always supported this policy since 1990. We are already in the fourth cycle of exams, as said by the director of OECD. We also had the participation of the OECD expert teams, more than 5 collaborations from Portugal, a program that we value a lot, and we are here to present the results. And also to say that we really thank the presentation of Mrs. Jo Tyndall, which summarizes OECD recommendations. The first aspect we should take into account is the evaluation period of this report. It has been a very difficult period in which Portugal and Troika intervention. It was then a COVID period, a period of recovery, many adaptations from the economic point of view. One first aspect, which is also important to take into account, is the capacity that Portugal had to bring the environmental policies compatible with the lifestyle of citizens. And today we have a new challenge. We also wanted to, or following this logic of combining the difficulty that we have to bring policies compatible with the accessibility to ensure products to the citizens. We wanted to organize this debate, this discussion that regards environmental challenges in a context of crisis, because crises are not easy from the point of view of the environmental issues. As we heard, there was a number of difficult decisions to be taken to put an end to the carbon stations without questioning the energy, also considering the war in Ukraine. And we are very proud to have been successful in presenting today, in view of the difficult year we had last year, in maintaining these difficult policies. And also to tell you that since 1993, the first evaluation made by OECD regarding Portugal, Portugal has had a very positive evaluation. We have had report after report a positive evolution. And we have always looked for, and this is true, even in more, we had some successful matters and also less successful matters. But anyway, we have been concerned in looking very attentively to OECD recommendations and to enforce them. The work that is developed here is very important to the design of public policies on environmental matters. We realize that, in fact, this evolution, in this evolution, we have tried to transpose into the national policies without going through all the recommendations by OECD. It is important in my speech at least to refer some of them, although generally, because the challenges are challenges we undertake during this decade, the decade until 2030, the most important decade for us to meet some environmental challenges and goals. Since we have started our work, we always hear that we don't have time. We have to go speedily. And Portugal accepts many of these recommendations, knowing that in many aspects Portugal is a reference from the point of view of environmental policies, but other matters we are really behind, and we have to recover our work. We know we have never hidden that, and we know the challenges we have ahead, and we will take them into account seriously, starting with waste. It is clear that Portugal has to reduce the landfills use. And for that, we have to reinforce the principles of circularity. We have to increase the recycling levels, to increase the capacity of collection of bio-waste. It is a national challenge. All the municipalities are forced to introduce selective collection of bio-waste, and we know that we should use them as a resource through production of biogas. We have to introduce systems allowing to encourage greater recycling of packages. We have approved recently, a week ago, in a Council of Ministers, the update of the strategy of urban solid waste. And shortly, in some weeks, we are going to approve UNILEX, allowing us to the return deposit should be made across the country with the grants. And we are going to generalize in Portugal in order for us to increase the number of recycling of packages, giving a return to the citizens that contribute to this recycling. We will reduce essentially the waste that go to landfill, and we are going to shortly approve the UNILEX, and with UNILEX we quickly will generalize the system of deposit with returns. It is a very difficult challenge, by the way, to Portugal. Portugal has positively evolved in matters of water, the quality of water. We also have challenges in waste of the infrastructures that we have created and future infrastructures as well. And there is a clear need for us to have a sustainable strategy regarding funding and our environmental infrastructures. And this requires to use our infrastructures to be smarter in the investments we are going to have, and also to apply the best price possible to environmental services. And this is something we will have to do gradually on water and wastewater. It is an exercise that we have to do under the current context, high inflation, increase of the cost of life, but it is something we have to progress, the reduction of the costs in our infrastructures and the tariffs. This is asymmetrically distributed. We have to do this exercise more quickly or quicker to recover investments, to have the capacity to generate sustainability in the management of these assets, and we should also not forget the solidarity between regions, because we know quite often that infrastructures across the coastline because they are older, they have already a structure that was depreciated, and sometimes in the interior of Portugal we have recent infrastructures that need to be paired. We cannot recover the costs without taking into account the regional harmony. As I said a while ago, we have to be very attentive to the current context we are living with the high inflation rates, not creating a social problem to the citizens. Otherwise, the citizens will be against the environmental policies, and this is a goal we don't have. It is a clear recommendation in many matters, namely in water. We have to be able to maintain the infrastructures that Portugal was able to put in place, but also in sewage waste, it is something progressive, and it is something we have to progress even further. The regulators have supported us. We will have to progressively work with municipalities and also at the level of helping municipalities in reaching sustainability. That's why it is important to create new revenues, a new economy arising from these sectors, as I said a while ago regarding gas. And then to tell you another aspect in the report, something that we regularly mention in our presentations, the outcomes of climate change and the need for our territory to be adapted to climate change. This is clearly a Portuguese challenge. It is a great concern in Portugal that regards all the dimensions, the issue related with our coastline, and as well the issue of forest fires. And then to tell you that Portugal has also to invest and progress in efficiency and circularity. Recently, we had the opportunity to approve a legal system to simplify taxes, to encourage circularity, namely in water, use of waste. Just to give you some examples, we have, as far as water is concerned, in addition to the challenge associated with the maintenance of infrastructures and the quality of service Portugal has achieved, we were able to do climate adaptation. In 2022, we had an historic drought. Then we had a 15% decline in rainfall, and also we foresee a reduction in rain by until 25%. In December, we also had historic maximums of too much rain. So we have extreme weather conditions, both heat and rain. So we had necessarily to look to the context of the management policy, water management policy, not only following an efficiency logic, reducing consumption of water in agriculture. We have to be able to use infrastructures, and also we have to have such a management system in territories of more water stress. We have a water efficiency strategy plan in the Algarve. Algarve is a region with water stress. We have 200 million to invest to bet in the efficiency of consumption of water in urban areas, in agricultural areas, interconnections for us to bring water from an area to another, in an area that has more area to less, to areas with less water. Sometimes we have some water in some places and less in other places. We have to reinforce our capacity to capture water, to use the water in the existing dams, and to also invest in new water resources. Desalinization of water as a reserve supply system. Likewise, we have identified 4 other zones to work in Alentejo, the Tagus River zone, the Viseu and the Trás-os-Montes areas. We are working in these areas, our regions, with policies to develop plans of regional efficiencies that complement the policy that has to be done in sustainability, in environment, and policies related to water resources in Portugal. Regarding forests and forests, there is a risk here. We are a country that in certain years we have a significant number of forest fires. Our forests issues carbon as well, and the graph shows that. So we have to invest, and we have been investing in the policy of preventing forest fires, and we hope that OECD may recognize what we have been doing in preventing forest fires, the capacity to work in prevention, namely in what is primary prevention, the empowerment that we have to create programs to transform the landscape, and we are also developing a resilience plan, and we are encouraging the economic dimension of forests. Forests have 97% of forests are private in Portugal. If we don't develop policies of economic valorization, we will not have the necessary incentives to generate scale in forests. We recently launched, following a EU recommendation, the national regulation for the carbon public relation work in credibility, and monitor to be able to monitor these markets, fighting the greenwashing, generating short-term income for forests, and to add value and interest, and to fight the greatest challenge, the abandoned land that offer high risks, because we will have territories with less population density, little interest from the economic point of view. We have to contradict this in order for us to be able to have strategies allowing us to meet the goals for carbon neutrality. We have set an objective for 2050 in terms of carbon neutrality. There is also a recognition by the OECD for the importance of climate policies. We have to anticipate for 45 for us to be able to meet the goals. We have to reduce emissions and also to increase the capacity of carbon, and we have to incentive the economic valorization of the forests, and we have to mobilize the private sector, mobilize namely economic groups, for them to look to the forests, not only for what are the environmental services they provide, but also the value it brings. Portugal should value the payment of ecosystem services. Right now we have policies to pay ecosystem services in areas of management of forests, namely that arise from the program of transformation of the landscape, but this will complement the effort to encourage the private sector in investing in forests. We also, as said, as far as protected areas are concerned, Portugal has committed with the 2030 goal to classify 30% of our territory in sea and inland by 2030. At the level of the protected areas inland, we met the goals established for 2020. We have to work to reach 30%. We also to work in a more difficult way to classify more than 30% of our protected areas as a strict area. We are working with the Ministry of the Economy and the Air to classify maritime protected areas. In Montreal, this strategic goal has been supported, and Portugal is committed with this goal. We also know that we have to increase financial resources for biodiversity. We are revisiting the national strategy for biodiversity. We want to complete this adaptation this year, and we also want naturally to approve the programs of management of protected areas and how we manage the national parks. From the point of view, well, the government has undertaken a number of strategic objectives, demographic increase, overcome of inequalities, and so forth. Despite all the difficulties that we have lived with the war context, we were able to combine what are the answers necessary to face the immediate needs of the population with maintenance of long-term perspectives regarding sustainability of environmental strategies, namely at the level of energy. We have tried, and we must also undertake that we received a number of grants in order for the families to have a reduction in their energy invoices, the provisional supports for fuel, for instance, or for the gas tariff. We know that these grants are provisional. They are being given the context of crisis. These answers were key in our current context. We cannot, despite I am the Minister of the Environment speaking to you, we have to have a compatibility over time because the population demands support in accessibility and energy. Otherwise, we will not be meeting our objective. As I said, despite we have had the need to work in energy accessibility, we also worked in acceleration of production of renewable energy, and we did not set back in the carbon plants. We had average production of energy produced by renewable sources, and the number of days, consecutive days with 100% renewable. In 2021, we are proud to have shown that it was possible for Portugal to increase 4.9% of its GDP. So it is possible to grow with less carbon intensity in what is its economy. We have right now 16 gigawatts of installed capacity of renewables, 45% water, 35% wind, and 6% biomass and solar, 70% of the installed capacity of production of electricity in Portugal, natural gas accounting for the remaining 30 after closing carbon plants. We have a clear notion of our strategies for energy that require to accelerate the solar systems, to encourage storage of energy, hybridization, to use better the installed capacity of Portugal, to promote energy communities and self-consumption communities, and also to develop a strategy of production of renewable gases. Because we are unable to electrify the whole society and the economy, it's important to invest in renewable gases and to bring compatible the security of producing energy with a progressive strategy, including renewable gases in our economy. We also want, through a green hydrogen strategy, to become exporters of gas and renewable fuel from renewable gases. We believe that through renewable energy, we are attracting green industry, and the green industry will allow us to export renewable gases and to export products that arise from the incorporation of these gases. We have a good cooperation with France and Spain to create an hydrogen corridor in the future. We are going to anticipate and really believe that we will anticipate in 4 years the target that we have established in the national strategy to reach 2030 with 80% of the production of electrical energy from renewable source. This will allow us to significantly improve the environmental results. As said, we have challenges to monitor the investments that we have in the program of resilience. The percentage that we have dedicated to climate change. We have to necessarily work with green inspection with the Ministry of Finance. I want to thank the head of cabinet for the tax matters. Thank you very much for the work you did. We have a huge investment for mobility to expand the underground networks and to also update the road fleets. This is being done. Many of these measures can only have a reflex or an outcome in a future OECD report. We know that we have to also involve sharing. It is important to know that Portugal is really motivated and interested in international cooperation at climate level, namely with the Portuguese-speaking countries, and this is really key for us in the future. And to finish, I would like to tell you that Portugal faces with natural view. It's a stimulus for us to work even better. We have to also be compatible with the strategic plans that we are developing now, allows sharing with key players for the environmental results, be it other ministries of the government or even the municipalities of our country that share with us a number of competencies. I would like to thank very clearly all those involved in this evaluation, the Ministry of the Environment, all the divisions, all the OECD teams for this very important work, and to also tell you that we are going to continue in order to bring closer the evolution of the environmental policy in Portugal, and once again to thank the work that OECD has done and the contribution that allow Portugal to improve every day on environmental policies. Thank you.
Para enquadramento sobre as linhas estratégicas e orientadoras. Tô? Som?
For a contextualization about the guidelines, the strategic guidelines for the OECD program aimed at reviewing environmental performances of its member states, we will now give the floor the head of division of environmental performance and information, Nathalie Giroir.
Good morning. I will be quick because we know we have a busy schedule, but I wanted to give you a bit of a flavor of what is the OECD Environmental Performance Review Program. So as you saw already, this review is supported by internationally comparable economics and environmental indicators that are available in the OECD at a glance online platform. And we also have a country profile for Portugal. So these two documents will complement the environmental performance review that we are discussing today. So this program about country-specific recommendation existed for now 30 years, and we have conducted more than 100 of those reviews. We have all the OECD memberships, 38 countries, and we have also selected non-members. So we have already done a review of China, of Brazil, of South Africa, of Peru, and now we are starting a review of Egypt as a new country that is enhancing its collaboration with the OECD. And we are also at the same time starting a review of Costa Rica, which is the latest member of the OECD. Now this program is in a transition phase. The membership wanted to have an accelerated cycle for the reviews with a lighter structure, and Portugal review is piloting this new format. So there's a streamlined chapter on sustainable development and only one in-depth chapter, which is on carbon neutrality that was selected by Portugal. So this is why we're not covering all the environmental domains. Some of you who are familiar with the ancient EPR reviews, sometimes we had 5 chapters and 2 or 3 thematic in-depth chapters. So this is not the case now, and we would welcome your feedback on the structure of the new review. So this program is about peer learning. It was already mentioned by Joe Tyndall and also by the minister. And we want to raise the information that is available with other countries about Portugal good practices. And certainly here we can say that the component of the Portugal climate framework law ticked all the boxes for best practices. So you have a 5-year climate budget, you have sectoral mitigation plans, you have municipal climate action plans, you have annual government progress report to Parliament, you have green budgeting principles for the state, and the creation of an independent body, the Council for Climate Action, to evaluate the impact and provide recommendations, and also a web portal for the public. So these are the kind of design of law that is really helpful to share with other countries. Of course, it's a best practice, but we look forward also for the implementation of the law. But this will be certainly helpful for others who are in a similar phase as you are in the design of their climate policies. So we have 26 recommendations that was mentioned by Joe Tyndall. So we encourage you to conduct in between 2 reviews, maybe in 4 or 5 years, what we call a midterm assessment. So to see to what extent you will have come up with the implementations of the 26 recommendations. And this could be presented at the OECD in the context of the Working Party on Environmental Performance, and we are at your disposal to help you shape this kind of progress report in between assessment. And now beyond the launch, we would like to ask for your support to disseminate the key messages in your respective audience and communities. This will help to keep the report alive beyond the launch event. I hope that it will contribute to the national debate and ultimately help you make further progress on your goal. And maybe just one question for Minister Cordeiro is, how do you plan to use this review to improve Portugal environmental performance? You have mentioned a lot of policies that are in development and implemented, but the report hopefully will serve you in this debate publicly. So to close, I would like to thank you all on behalf of the EPR team, the Portuguese authorities, and all the stakeholders that were involved throughout this past year, who has taken the time to answer our questions and follow-up communications with us. It's been a very fruitful experience to work with you, and we look forward to further collaboration. Thank you very much.
Damos agora início a período.
We will now initiate a question and answer session. So we would like to invite the journalists to address any questions to the table and to ask any relevant questions. Thank you very much. Please raise your hands if you wish to intervene and ask any questions.
Temos aqui o senhor jornalista da RTP.
Good morning, Jessica Souza from Echo Newspaper. My question goes to the Environment Ministry. Looking at the conclusions from this report to the findings, are they in line with the expectations you had or the other environmental authorities regarding these matters? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your question. I would say, yes, they are in line with our assessment of environmental policies. In fact, this report has to do with the information that the government made available, the Portuguese civil society, NGOs, also the assessment from OECD. It's obvious that for Portugal, in our national strategic environments, there are areas where we have very positive results above the OECD average, which enable us to somehow believe that they mean we've been progressing in terms of achieving neutrality. However, there are other areas we have to work on towards recovering some areas we are lagging behind. One of the most evident areas, for example, the treatment of urban solid waste has been identified as an area of environmental recovery. There is also a great deal of work that needs to be done regarding the recovery of environmental fees towards the sustainability of environmental services. This can be done in different ways, and this can be done regionally, with aggregations, with service aggregating solutions in terms of gaining scale, efficiency, and also to offer a more balanced response since we have a territorial disadjustment in our policies. Clearly, also from a point of view of our strategic objectives, there is a need to integrate environmental objectives to economic services, especially in agriculture, but also to accelerate economic decarbonization. There is a need to update what the impacts of some of our tax system regarding fossil fuel consumption. As I mentioned, we've temporarily applied. We haven't updated the tariff in order to benefit consumers. There is also the need to enable some temporary interventions on the gas tariff. Fortunately, as I mentioned, these are a set of policies which are recommended in terms of deepening green fiscality. So we need to do these transitions, what we wish in terms of. There is also another very important reference that we need to take into account, the risk of not developing. I'm afraid there is some background noise.
So just to give you some specific examples, and then the report is very rich, is very dense, allow us to understand some areas where we are worse and better, and also the reference or the need we have to deepen the preservation of biodiversity of Portugal with management plan and financing recommendations that are made, which in our understanding should be as much as possible internalized in environmental policies that Portugal has for the future. Good morning. I have two questions to the minister. It has to do to the abandoned lands in forests. I'm from agency Lusa. How do we fight the plots of land that are abandoned? Because we have a high rate of abandoned plots of land. Regarding carbon neutrality by 2014, 45, if I'm not wrong, aren't we late? Thank you very much.
Regarding our forest policy, we believe that there must be a mix of policies that we need to devote our attention to. On the one hand, to continue the policy developed after 2017, which is present in our Recovery and Resilience Plan, as it's been recognized here, aims at improving, and it's been producing results in fighting wildfires, our capacity in offering effective responses, in reducing the number of burnt areas, and also reducing the economic and human impacts of wildfires. There is another aspect which is also present in our resilience plan, which is about landscape transformation. Our country has territories identified as vulnerable. These present a higher risk of wildfires. We must look at those vulnerable territories and develop policies for transforming landscape, looking to encourage forest production and producing a diverse, resilient forest, and not necessarily investing in monocrops. This is done according to the resilience plan by investing in transformation landscape plans and land management plans, by funding with an ecosystem service in forest typology which are not monocrops. This is also established in our recovery resilience plan. This is very important. We hope to also achieve this by identifying landowners with also the forest tracking and the importance of this forest history in the context where 97% of our forest is privately owned. There is also a very important aspect which needs to be completed, the economic aspect of forests. We need to focus more on this to try to increase our productivity, to offer incentives for aggregating small properties, to create more easily managed properties, to increase also incentives aligned with our environmental policy. Last week, we launched something new. So the voluntary market for carbon, if it's duly regulated, may generate credibility, fight greenwashing, while at the same time mobilizing private investment for forest production and protecting biodiversity. At the moment, we are publicly debating the Portuguese government proposal regarding this carbon voluntary market. There are some concrete projects, so some manifestations of interest, about 100,000 hectares of forest, just to give you a few examples of projects. And we believe that this can be a complementary work to what we've been doing, which will enable that besides the natural woods value cycle, that the forest can have other short-term valorization cycles. So we intend that these forest projects will increase carbon capturing. So this is very important to achieve this circularity, and these are the ways, these are what we've been doing in order to have a strategy which can combine economic, environmental objectives, and to reduce risks of wildfires and while reducing carbon emissions. Regarding the second question, as I mentioned in my speech, we feel that obviously we are fighting against urgency. These reports are so important in order to realize if we are in the right track and if we've been having results. I think it's positive that the Portuguese people know that we are on the right track and we've been having results. So much of the work we've developed needs to be accelerated. This is why we've designed a mix of policies in simplifying in our objectives for renewable energy. Portugal wants to be a reference in environmental policy. So I think that with all this, we can also encourage other countries, especially as we've seen at the mix of energy, electric energy production, we are above the OECD average, and we wish to use renewable energies as a strategy of using our natural resources, but also as an economic engine, because renewable energies are the ones offering better autonomy, better prices, and better future prospects. So at this level, it's also important that the Portuguese people know that the choices we made in the last few years have produced results and have been recognized by foreign organizations. Hello again. So the OECD report had the opportunity of focusing on investing on renewable energy. So I'd like to know whether the government has any novelties regarding the biomethane investments in the sense of encouraging the investment in these gases, which are important for the development of the country. Thank you. Thank you. So regarding biomethane, we have a strategy related to renewable gases, which also includes biomethane. In January this year, we published the reference terms for the centralized purchase of biomethane with tariffs, which consumers will be purchasing biomethane in order to inject them in the network. This is important. Why? Because we have many biomethane projects in Portugal which needed this predictability of knowing how much the fee would be in order to ensure its production. Last year, there was the first biomethane injection in the network. At the moment, our network is prepared for this, so the fees have been published. Also recently, regarding our recovery and resilience plan, we've had the chance to sign 25 contracts of about 100 million euros for green hydrogen projects and biomethane until the end of 2024. So our country is strongly motivated in valorizing biomethane. Also, the Pursue recent strategy, which was approved last week, has also considered biomethane in using it for energy, for recycling bio-waste, and also by using the other fractions of urban waste. So biomethane will be central, and at the moment we have a set of policies which are aligned. We need to realize whether the economic incentives we've created are the appropriate ones. We need to adjust them, refine them. But I'd say that we've already done some good work by injecting it in the network. The fees have been published, and we'll be doing this in the first semester of this year. We also have 25 contracts for green hydrogen and biomethane, and we will be publishing our bio-waste strategy, where biomethane is very important for these objectives. Very well. I believe we have no further questions for the time being. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now have a short coffee break. We will resume in 10 minutes with a seminar on the topic environmental challenges in face of crisis. Thank you.